So Greg, who introduced himself and his lineages, he has been involved in the preservation of his cultural heritages for over 3 decades. He is here this afternoon with the Association for the Ramaytush Ohlone. He is very active in community education, particularly around Indigenous California, and not only through events like these, but also with curriculum development that has educated so many people throughout our region. Greg, we're so grateful to have you here today and welcome your voice. I will be showing you a reverse 5 and a 1 as we move through the time, and just to give you a heads up as far as how much time you have left.
That's fine. And hopefully you appreciate an informal conversation, because that's how I roll. No speechifying for me. And I'm glad one good thing about Zoom is that there's no podium to have to stand behind and look official. So thank you very much for having me. I feel very honored and humbled. And I've been awaiting this for a year, as we discussed having me being a part of it from last year. So you would think I would have plenty of time to do a presentation, but we'll see how this goes. And of course, we're honored to be a part of this opening panel talking about connecting to the past, the indigenous people of the San Francisco Bay Area. And when we do that, we speak of the Ohlone people, as they're called today, referenced in a generic sense. But we're talking about many peoples. We're talking about many communities, and they're very diverse, connected to their culture, to their lands in various ways, and still struggling to survive in this world. And we're going to talk about that in this presentation, and Chairman Val's presentation, I believe, to follow mine. I myself am of mixed heritage, and that is very common in California for historical reasons, particularly in the mission areas that we occupy here and along the coast. From a little north to us in Sonoma down to the San Diego border, the California missions had a dramatic impact on all the communities of California that had been here for thousands of years. In our scientific terms, it's been as long as 15,000 years, some believe more. But in our scientific terms, the oral narratives of our elders teach us we've been here since the beginning of time. And we were put here for a reason by Creator. She gave us these lands to take care of, to be stewards of. And I was taught by elders that in that narrative, we're almost always last. And if you've been a member of a family, perhaps as youngest as I was, by the time you show up, your family's all kind of taken care of, right? Your parents hopefully know how to parent, how to go to work and pay the bills and put food on the table. You have a backyard to maybe play in, siblings perhaps, and it's kind of all dialed in for you. And that's what had happened with many of the stories that we are told about how we came into the world. It was created and formed by the first people, what we call the first people. Those are what you refer to sometimes as animal people, eagle, bear, deer, and all the varied forms of life that were here that had at that time special powers and unique ways of forming the land and taking care of it. And when we came along, as one of my elders called us, the two-footers, we were then instructed by them on how to continue that work. That was our role as the youngest. And part of that was understanding this gift we have. We didn't earn it. We didn't, quote unquote, deserve it. We were gifted this opportunity, this place in the universe on this earth. And we should be grateful for it. That's how we came into the world. Gratitude, humility for this gift that could be a challenge for us if we didn't take care of it right, because it gave us everything we needed. And in many of our oral narratives, it says that we were made from those very things. We were made from elderberry. We were made from bushes. We were made from trees and rocks and other things of the land itself. So we were not just on the land, we were of the land. and the land is of us. Or as one of my elders said, we don't own land, the land owns us. And we, again, learn to be grateful for that. And how do you express that gratitude? Well, you take care of things that are given to you as a gift. And so we learned with great skill over many thousands of years how to take care of our lands. And I think we did a pretty good job. As a matter of fact, when the first Europeans showed up, they thought it was a wilderness that was created and fashioned directly by the hand of God. And in a sense, it was fashioned by God, and we were God's hands. Creator taught us how to take care of that land, form it, nurture it, not dominate it, not rearrange it. We didn't have the audacity to believe we were better than nature, that we were above nature, that we knew more than nature knew about itself. And that's the way we conducted ourselves in our cultures for thousands of years. And we learned in very subtle ways how to do that. So subtle that when the newcomers came, they couldn't tell that we were doing anything. And so when they saw some of the things that happened, like cultural burning, they banned them because they, first of all, were afraid of fire. They were afraid of the things that we were doing. And of course, they wanted the land itself for their own purposes, not based necessarily on caretaking, but on extraction. And so after 15,000 years, perhaps more, we are now faced with a short time period of mass destruction, to be honest, in 250 years after the first European incursion on land into California, the Portola expedition. We are faced with catastrophe, as we hear, especially here in California, have experienced with the wildfires, with the massive climate change effects, because the native people were banned centuries ago from doing the things that they've been told and knew were the right thing to do for thousands of years. So now here we are in modern times, and we're sort of slowly, as a modern society, thinking perhaps we need to do something a little bit different. Perhaps we should listen to other sources of knowledge. And as we call them, perhaps listen to our scientists, our elders, who don't have fancy diplomas. They just have vast knowledge of thousands and thousands of years that tells us what we need to do. Even in these times of radically changed landscapes, we still believe we have answers. We believe we have a way to approach things that can create a life for everyone that's still worth living on land that's still worth living on. So that's the struggle today of trying to reestablish ourselves on a land that's been taken away from us, and we've been taken away from the land. There is actually very few Ramaytush. That's not uncommon in California mission history, sadly enough. There's very few Ohlone compared to the many thousands there used to be. But certainly in the Ramaytush situation, there's very few. And we struggle to have even a postage stamp sized piece of land in the place that we've been for thousands and thousands of years. But I am happy, this is not an official announcement, but I am happy to say that we are on the verge of reacquiring land in our homeland, hopefully to have an official announcement in the near future. But we have put together a coalition of people to where we can say that we're back home again. And we're doing this in a fashion that we think our elders would respect and praise us for at least having some of the knowledge left us by them. We're doing this in a radically different way if you compare it to modern science, modern agriculture. We're using techniques that are, I guess you could say, state of art in modern terms. But for indigenous people, perhaps not so radical, perhaps ancient, perhaps well used and well learned over a vast amount of time, and yet haven't been seen in these later days. But these times and these lands need this kind of caretaking that we're going to undertake shortly in our homelands. So hopefully we'll have some information and detailed plans that we can share with people, because one of the goals of our efforts is to not just take care of the land we're on, but help other people as we've been helped by other people, by the examples of nearby people like the Kashaya Pomo, the Maidu Consortium, the Amamutsun that Val will probably share with you in a moment. Our relatives down in Salinan Nation who have just reacquired land. This is a time where we are coming back and coming home, and we're very humble and very excited and very nervous about that prospect. And of course, there's challenges along the way because of the education that hasn't happened in the vast amount of the public. Let me share a story with you about erasure. When I was in high school, about 15 years old or so, I decided I wanted to try to go to college. So I took my bike and rode it for about an hour to downtown San Jose, where the American Indian Center was at the time. And I walked in, and of course, there was a lot of elders around who weren't used to seeing teenagers hanging out. And so they were very excited that a teenager actually came in. And then they asked me, well, what are you doing here, young man? And I said, well, gee, I'm thinking about going to college. And they got really excited because they rarely heard that amongst their youth at that time, that somebody actually wanted to go to college. So the elder sat me down, pulled out some paper, got pencils, and okay, we're going to start this process of signing you up. So what's your tribe? And when I was growing up, my father's tribe was known as the Ohlone Indians. So I said, Ohlone. Well, who are they? I've never heard of them, the elder said. And I said, well, they're just actually very close to here. They're down in the mountains of Monterey County, and they're around San Antonio Mission and San Miguel Mission, and that's where we've been for thousands of years. And he looked at me and he said, there are no more California Indians. And what could I say to an elder as a 15-year-old being told that I didn't exist? It was the same story I heard from my own teachers from 4th grade and on up, that there were no more California Indians. They were here, they built some missions with some missionaries, and then they magically disappeared. And just like that, the elder extinguished me, and I just walked out and never went back. And that has been something that I've carried with me for many decades, until in about a little more than 30 years ago, on the passing of my father, I decided that I needed to do something to show gratitude for my father and what culture he and love of homeland he shared with me. And so I started my journey working on cultural site protection, cultural resource management, becoming a member of Society for California Archaeology, which struck my elders as odd because we don't talk to archaeologists. We know what they've done to us in the past. But other elders told me that's where our culture is. They've taken it from us. They talk about it. They decide what they're going to do with it. Somebody needs to be there to be of our voice. And so I chose to be that, even not knowing what to say. So over the years, I've tried to be a voice for my own people, my Salinan people, my rumsien-ramaytush people, and advocate for other Native people across the state in cultural resources and site protection. Much later, I've come up with the fundamental issue of our times, beyond even the ecological destruction we've been experiencing the last 2.5 centuries, and that's the lack of knowledge. The same expressed by that elder from out of state who grew up in the same school system that told you and told me that the Indians of California were no longer here. And so I decided to work on curriculum with a professor that I met at a California Indian conference that was doing a presentation on a curriculum that one of her students was creating for her own tribe here in California. And that decided the start of a coalition called the California Indian History Curriculum Coalition, based out of CSU-Sacramento College of Education. And we're supporting communities to write their own curriculum and not wait for anybody else to do it for us. That is the fundamental answer to all of this. In order to do any of the work we do, we have to talk about it, and we have to partner with other people. And in order to do that, to form coalitions, to collaborate, to consult, they have to have a fundamental knowledge of who we are and that we're still here. And that just doesn't exist much yet today. Even with as much attention as we've been getting lately, it's still a fundamental issue for many of the people we encounter in our work. So that is a goal of ours, is to create knowledge through curriculum, through public awareness, public outreach, that we are still here and we're still trying to do the work that our Creator gave us thousands of years ago. There's not many of us. The numbers game of, I call it, of our anthropology tosses numbers around like a game. They say, oh, there was maybe 300,000 of us before contact. And there was 25,000 of us left. Or some say there was 750,000 of us before and 20,000 of us are left. Or maybe more than 1 million. Whatever the number, I think it can be disputed that more than 90% of our people died in 100+ year period from contact into the establishment of the state and beyond. 90% plus. And of course, you can imagine what the experiences of the remaining 10% were. So this is the challenge that we have to overcome while we do this work. So the thing I would leave everyone with is just like at the beginning when we talked about land acknowledgements and finding out the land that you're on and who was there. Try to learn a little bit about them as you go about it. And to do it on your own, and that's a tricky thing to do given the dearth of information in academia and the lack of quality of information on the internet. Still, I think that is the biggest favor you can do to Native people, is to educate yourself about who is in the place you're at and what they are doing now. And then perhaps gently, with humility, offer your support. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to the discussion and questions afterwards.
Thank you very much. We really are so grateful to have you with us, Gregg, and with the important message of learning and connecting and fostering, deepening relationships with each other, with the people of the places where we are, and through that reconciling for the time lost through the erasure that you mentioned. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We look forward to being in further discussion with you after we hear from Chairman Valentin Lopez.